exactly as we have told you, that's what you're going to do. You won't change one thing. Meaning everything we've instructed you, all that we have learned as we learned in the previous Mishnayot of the Seder Hayom, the order of the day, which Karbanot to bring, when to bring them, how to bring them, etc., that you will keep to that faithfully and you won't change from that one bit. Why was this necessary? Why make such an oath? After all, this is the Kohen Gadol. So as we learned previously, the Kohen Gadol, unfortunately, while technically speaking, he is supposed to be Kohen Gadol Me'achav, supposed to be the greatest Kohen, and that's how he gets to such a position and gets the honor and the privilege of being able to do the Avodah on Yom Kippur, even though in theory that's true and that's the way it should be. During many times in history, that wasn't the case, and the Kohen Gadol would be appointed by the government, often the non-Jewish government, particularly during the Bayit Sheni. And if that was the case, so then we have no idea who the Kohen Gadol is going to be. They might choose someone very righteous and wonderful. They might choose someone who they feel a close connection to, do a political favor for, to make him the Kohen Gadol. But we don't know if necessarily the person is really going to be worthy to be a Kohen Gadol. Therefore, we have to make sure, as we learned previously, he knows about the Avodah, he knows how to bring Korbanot, he knows exactly what he's doing. And even more than that, at this point, the Zakenim had to make him take an oath that he would do the Avodah correctly. In particular, there was a fear of a tzeduki, of a sadducee, of those people who took the Torah bichtav, literally, without following the Masorah, the traditions of our Torah Shebe'al Peh. And there was a fear one of those people would become a Kohen Gadol, and he would end up doing the Avodah as a tzeduki and not the proper way, not the way that Chazal teach us. In particular, the Pasuk says that when you bring the Ketoret into the Kodesh HaKadashim, the one time a person would go into the Kodesh HaKadashim, so the Torah teaches us, Ki be'anan ira'eh el hakaporet, right? Through a cloud, you will be seen in front of the kaporet. I mean, that's when the Kohen Gadol would al kaporet, correct? That's when the Kohen Gadol would go and bring this ketoret in the Kodesh Kadashim. So the Tzedukim would say that means ki be'anan ashan hakatoret yavo va'az ira el kaporet, that you would come with smoke. The Kohen would already have smoke with him, a smoking pan of the ketoret, and then go inside into the Kodesh HaKadashim. That would be the order. He would light the pan on fire, have smoking coals, and then go into the Kodesh HaKadashim. That indeed is not correct, because the Torah says that indeed the Ketoret should be put on the fire in front of Hashem, meaning after he already enters into the Kodesh HaKadashim. So if that's the case, so then in fact the Ketoret should be placed afterwards once he goes in. So that order is a significant point. What order are you doing the Avodah, and when are you going to place the Ketoret onto the fire? If you do it the wrong way, you place it on before, outside you go into the Kodesh HaKadashim, so then that's improper. The Avodah Yom Kippur has to be very precise, exactly the way the Torah prescribed it. That's the Avodah the Kohen has to do, and there was nervousness that this Kohen would do it as a Tzeduki, and not as a Prushi, not as those who followed the words of Chazal. And therefore, the Ziknei Beitin would make him swear that he will do exactly as they instructed him. He will follow precisely the order of the Avodah, the way he's supposed to follow the order, and that was the Shua that they make him swear. So again, Mashpiu anu alacha, we bring a swear upon you, b'mish hashichen et shema bayit hazeh, with he who has dwelt his name upon this house, obviously referring to Hashem, shelo tishaneh davar mikol ma she'amarnu lecha, that you will not change a thing from everything that we have told you. Exactly what we described to do the Avodah, that's exactly what you are going to do. Finally, the Mishnah concludes, Hu poresh uvocha v'hein porshin uvochin. He would be poresh, he would step aside, step away from them and cry. V'hein porshin uvochin, and they would step away as from him and cry as well. And this was a very emotion-filled moment, because ideally you'd have a Kohen Gadol who was representing the Jewish people in Yom Kippur. He'd be the perfect person to represent them, and there's nothing greater there. He would be the leader, he'd be our teacher. And now that the Beit Din feels that they have to make him take an oath just to make sure he does the Avodah correctly, That's a very sad moment. Of course, it's a necessary moment. You have to do it if you really suspect him. But it's a sad moment. So therefore, he would cry that they suspected him. That look, I had to swear in order to clear my name, so that they would know that I'm going to do that properly. V'hein portion of vochin, because they hopefully suspected him improperly. They suspected him of they suspected of something not true. It's called choshid b'kshirim. They suspected someone who's really kosher, who really didn't do anything wrong, and therefore they themselves would cry that look, this person's the Kohen Gadol, and we had to make him swear that, just that he's going to keep the basic halacha. So that as well, they would cry as well. Okay, Mishnah Vav. So we're going to get back to the night of Yom Kippur, the evening of Yom Kippur, before the day of Avodah. And as you mentioned earlier, we don't want the Kohen to become tummy at night, which could happen if he falls asleep, and therefore we keep him awake the entire night. How do you keep him awake the entire night? So we learned previously about not feeding him, not giving him too many foods that would make him fall asleep. But what activities would he do all night? So the Mishnah continues. Im chacham toresh, im chacham hu, according to our version. Then he would be doresh. He would learn very simply. He would learn the halachot that night. And doresh means he would lecture. He would expound upon the halachot. He wouldn't just learn it himself, but he would be doresh deeper meanings from halachot. And if that's who he was a chacham, tamid chacham. He would be able to teach. He'd be able to involve himself in learning. That would keep him awake, would keep him active, and that would be terrific. Ve'im lav. But let's say not. Let's say he is ve'im lav talmid chacham. Ve'im lav, if not, talmidei chachamim dorshin lefanav. If not, then, meaning if he himself is not a chacham, then he would have to have talmidei chachamim being doresh in front of him, meaning he can't read himself. So instead, he would have other talmidei chachamim to read in front of him. He couldn't expound; he would have others do it for him. The Mishnah continues: Ve'im ragil lekrot koreit. If he is someone who perhaps is not a chacham, then he's able to be doresh, he's able to expound, to lecture to other people. But at least he can read. So then he would read. Meaning, korei doesn't just mean reading a book, it means reading from the Torah itself. And back then they didn't have printed chumashim with nikudot like we have now. To read means to read from a Torah scroll. That obviously takes some skill and focus and concentration and training. Then he'd be able to open up a Torah, a scroll, and be able to read it. But if he had that skill, so then terrific. Then that's what he would do, spend the night doing that. Obviously that takes also a lot of focus and concentration, engagement, and that would keep him awake. V'im lav. But if not, if he doesn't know how to read from the Torah itself, Kohen lefanav, you would read in front of him. So again, as you mentioned, Kohen Gadol is not necessarily the ideal person for the job, and such a person not ideal for the job might not really know how to read very well, and therefore read in front of him. Kohen lefanav, and from what do we read in front of him? Meaning, which of the Svarim of Tanakh do we actually read in front of him? Right, what do we actually have to read? So for that, the Mishnah tells us, be Eov, uve Ezra, uve Divrei Hayamim. So it says there are 3 books that they would read, either from the book of Eov, from Ezra, or Divrei Hayamim. The Tiferet Yisrael, one of the commentators, points out that each of these books has a unique characteristic in terms of the type of book it is, the type of learning it is, which could talk to different people. Eov is something which is an in-depth intellectual pursuit, the question of theodicy, of good and evil, and why bad happens to good people. Those sorts of questions all come up through Eov, and for certain people that's something that would engage them, keep them awake, and for that Kohen Gadol that would work. Ezra is something more on the emotional side. It awakens one's feelings, emotions, the story of Bnei Israel coming back after being in Galut, rebuilding the Beit HaMikdash, being able to come back home. And that would allow some people to become engaged and involved and interested. And Divrei Hayamim is more of a story telling you about stories of the Nevi'im, of going over things that happened during different time periods within Tanakh, and different kings, the rulers, and therefore that would engage certain people as well in certain different times. So therefore the Mishnah is giving different examples of ways of learning things that we're going to pull in the interest of the Kohen Gadol and allow him to stay awake. Zachariah ben Kevutal Omer, Zachariah the son of Kevutal said, Pa'amim harbe kariti lefanav b'Daniel. Many times I would read in front of him from Sefer Daniel. Apparently this Zachariah ben Kevutal was someone who found himself in the Beit HaMikdash, with the job of learning with the Kohen Gadol in order to keep him awake. And he says that very often he would actually be the one reading, and when he would read from Sefer Daniel. So again, the idea being seeming that there's not one thing to read, it's not there's one prescription, not the halakha dictates one particular thing must be read, but rather whatever will work to keep the Kohen Gadol awake, that is what is going to be read. So that's what Zachariah ben Kevutal said. So again, these two Mishnayot go from the time when the Ziknei Beit Din would bring the Kohen to the Beit HaMikdash, to the Beit Avtinas, at which point they would give him over to the Kohanim to teach him about the Ketorat. But before they did that, they make him swear that he will do the Avodah properly, out of fear that he would do it like a Tzeduki. The Tzedukim, of course, were the ones who followed Torah B'chtav strictly without the traditional Torah B'al Peh, and therefore their Avodah came out somewhat different from ours. And then we learned about how we would go about keeping the Kohen Gadol up all night. Either he would be the one teaching others, or he would be reading, or we would be reading in front of him from various books that would keep him awake.